All right, we're going to kick things off here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. If this is a session that you've attended previously, welcome back. And for any new attendees, thanks for joining us. We're looking forward to having you here. My name is Tom Pasek. I'm a Senior Technical Product Marketing Manager here at ServiceNow. I work with our Performance Analytics business unit. I'm going to do a quick introduction here and run through some logistics for office hours for those of you who haven't seen these slides in the past, and then we'll jump into today's topic. So first of all, just keep in mind these sessions are for all of you, our customers and partners. Make sure you get the help that you need. So feel free to just listen in if you want to soak up the knowledge that's being shared here, but keep in mind it's also your opportunity for Q&A. So if you do have questions, please ask. Obviously, we can't get too deep into the specifics with a particular instance, so we can't have you sharing your screen. So there may be cases where if we can't answer a question on the spot, we may ask you to raise an incident on high, and we can follow up with you there. You do have the ability to go off mute and ask questions. If you're not speaking, though, we're going to ask that you please make sure that your microphone is muted so you're not interrupting our presenter or other folks asking questions. If you'd prefer, you can also use the text-based chat that's available in Zoom. We've got some folks who will be monitoring the questions that go in there, and at the end, we'll circle back and try and make sure that all of those have been addressed. These meetings are also being recorded, so if you see the little recording indicator in the corner of the screen here, if you're not comfortable with that or your organization is not comfortable with that, please go ahead and disconnect now. And coming up in just a few short weeks here, we're going to have our Knowledge 2019 conference. So that'll be happening in Vegas. You still have the opportunity to join us if you haven't signed up yet. You can take a look at the website. We'd love to have you there. If you are coming, I'm going to run through a few performance analytics sessions that we have on the schedule here just to whet your appetite. And if you haven't found these in the schedule builder, you may want to go and search for them if they look interesting to you. So starting on Tuesday, we have a number of labs across performance analytics and reporting topics. There's just one breakout that's happening on Tuesday. Wednesday's a little busier. A few different breakout sessions that you can attend across customers like Sainsbury's, Verizon, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So there's some great content queued up in these sessions for you to hear if you'd prefer to dig in and get some hands-on experience. We also have a number of labs that we're also offering on Wednesday. And so many that we can't even fit it on one slide. And then wrapping up on Thursday, again, a few more breakout sessions from Williams-Sonoma, PayPal, DXC, and labs will be going. A few of these are going to be on a repeat schedule. So if you can't attend the first one earlier in the week, we'll have another session where you can jump on and attend that one. So we'd love to have you there. Please come say hi if you are around. We're looking forward to it. And before I turn things over here, many of you who have attended this office hours in the past, you're probably used to Izak presenting. Unfortunately, Izak is off deserving some vacation or off enjoying some much deserved vacation time right now. So we have Adam Stout's going to stand in for him today. And I think we're going to talk about formula indicators. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Thanks, Tom. And I will try to share. And is PowerPoint up for everybody?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I apologize for not having a strong Greek accent, so just pretend that I'm Izak. Today we're going to spend a few minutes talking about formula indicators. Hopefully a lot of us are already using these. We want to go into a couple of more extended features, things that aren't necessarily obvious to come through. So we're going to talk about why do we use formula indicators. If any of you aren't, let's talk about that really briefly. We'll go through some basic formula indicators using JavaScript and formula indicators to get a little bit more functionality out of it. And then there were some really awesome enhancements in Madrid to support formula indicators doing a lot more things. We're going to talk about a couple of use cases for those. We're going to go through this in just 5 or 10 minutes. It'll be pretty quick. The point here is to expose you to what can be done. And then we have some references that explain more how to do it later. So why do we use formula indicators? What do they do for us? And the key thing here to remember is that the formula indicators give us a way to get more knowledge out of the existing indicators. And they allow us to transform and normalize the indicators into meaningful KPIs. It's not just adding two things together, but getting meaningful KPIs. Automated indicators are useful, but most of the time they're useful because we can use them in formulas and to normalize and transform them. So what do I mean by that? Really common indicators we see are the number of SLAs breached, the number of open incidents, the number of incidents over 5 days, new incidents, closed incidents. Great, but those really are metrics. They're not KPIs. They're hard. What I want to see in a KPI is something that allows me to do a comparison between different breakdowns, so different groups, different data centers, different callers, whatever I want to do. So different breakdowns, and I want to compare them over time. So month over month, how is this group doing compared to that group? How is this group doing compared to itself last quarter? Number of open incidents is really hard to do that because what if group A supports 100 users and group B supports 1,000 users? Those absolute numbers are not very comparable. Or if you're growing, you're seeing rapid growth and the same use case. I had 100 users in Q4, but I've staffed up 2 new buildings and now I have 1,000 users I'm supporting. None of these metrics are comparable. I just cannot say who's doing better or worse. But if I make these into formula indicators and create meaningful KPIs, SLA attainment percentage, the number of open incidents, they don't all have to be percentages, but it's normalized. The number of open incidents per CI supported, per user supported, backlog growth percentage. I now can take those same metrics that I have, those same automated indicators, and compare them. Every team has the same number. I can have the same targets month over month over month, quarter over quarter, and I can understand who's doing their job well and who's not, and look at it to go, why is this team succeeding and this one failing? That's what we're trying to get out of performance analytics, not just I have 100 open incidents. That's good, but that's reporting gives me that. We want to take it to the next level. We need meaningful KPIs. So let's talk about what's in the formulas. What can we do? Really basic use cases that I think are all out of box. The percentage of incidents resolved by first group. Right, here's some example formulas. We'll look at these in a little bit more. But percentage resolved by first group, great. That is a nice percentage. It's normalized. I can compare that between different groups to see who's getting it done the first time and who needs more follow-up. SLA attainment, who's hitting their SLAs, who's not. As a percentage of what you're supposed to do, what are you doing? And backlog growth, open minus closed. How big is it growing? I can watch that over time. Important notes for just formula indicators in general, these are going to build off of each other, but they operate on existing scores, so they are not part of a data collection, and they work on all historic data. So if I add a new formula indicator today based off of number of incidents open and number of incidents closed, those 2 automated indicators I have going back from when I turned on PA 3 years ago, my formula works for all of that. That's very different than automated indicators where I have to do a historic collection and it's part of the job. Be sure that you add your desired breakdowns to formula indicators. It doesn't happen automatically. If you're going to follow a breakdown, it has to be on all of the automated indicators or formula indicators you're building on. But just make sure you think about that. I see a lot of people create formula indicators and they forget to add the breakdowns, and we're losing a lot of value there. And formula indicators are not materialized. They are calculated on the fly, right? They are not stored in a table somewhere. This is done when you call it. Why that matters when we get into JavaScript and formula indicators. So you can run any JavaScript that you want. You can run in a formula as well. So examples that I've used in the past are rounding scores. So we have digits of precision. So digits of precision will give me 1 decimal point, 2 decimal points. But there are certain cases where I just want to round the number and kind of get a step inside of it. So this formula allows me to use the math library and get to quarter points, right? So instead of having lots of variations, all of my scores will go to the nearest quarter point. You could use seal or floor. I've used those in the past as well. I can't have half an incident. I can't have half a CI, so sometimes I'll want to use ceiling, so it's always kind of giving me the real case that's going on. Constants, this is a question that comes up. A formula indicator can let me do a constant. You do need to have some non-null indicator in it so it knows when to render, when not to, but by simply putting number of open incidents, something I always have for every day, I can then put a constant value in. This is useful sometimes when you want to show some constant line that you know is coming through. This is how you do it with a formula indicator. And then we'll look at show or hiding manual scores based on date. So I have score start and score end, just like I do in scripts. I have those in formulas as well. I can call glide date time, and then I can do things based on date. This is not a super common use case, but the manual scores ones I've seen. If I'm going to put a manual forecast in, I need to forecast something, and I'm going to do it with a manual indicator. I don't want to see my old forecast. I'll put a formula like this in, which then knows only show this in the future, or perhaps only show it in the past. And then I can transform based on some other information. We'll show a little example of this. It's pretty nonsensical, but we'll show it. This, when you're doing some other more advanced JavaScript, is not a single bullet. I'm writing something more. Important notes. In addition to everything we talked about before, this is JavaScript that's run on the server side, not client-side scripts, but server-side script. Anything you can do, any script include you can do here. It's calculated when it's requested. So when I go to view a dashboard, when I go to call the API, when I go to view the analytics hub, that's when these are processed. You have access to everything on the server side, right? Including script includes. And you want to make sure you're aware, though, because of those things above, that you're very aware of performance. Do not put a glide record call in here. You can, don't do it. You could do a glide aggregate. You can, don't do it, right? Because what happens if I'm viewing an analytics hub that's showing me 180 days worth of data, I'm then going to make that call 180 times just to render what I'm viewing. So be very aware of performance, and then not a typo, be very aware of performance. And then if you didn't read the first two, be very aware of performance, right? It's fine to do a constant. It's fine to do rounding. Rounding is very fast. But when you start doing more time-consuming things, you're going to pay a price for that in user experience, right? So avoid glide records, glide aggregates, a REST call. Those are things that are theoretically possible, but you're going to pay for it with performance. And then the last section that we have are the new enhancements to Madrid. So there is a new library called PA Formula Utils. If you go look at the docs, you'll see more examples of these things. Just at a high level, it allows us to have a lot more interaction. So what this is used for, index indicators. We've done these in the past. There's been a lab at Knowledge on these. I think there's some posts about how to do it. I believe it is PA 201 or 202. We're going to do it again. Index indicators had some limitations before. With the use of formula utils, we can now do very, very powerful index indicators, which allow me to take the SLA attainment plus number of new incidents plus first call resolutions, put different weights to them, and then create an index score for how each team is doing to handle index. Amazingly powerful to take a series of KPIs and roll them up level to level, right? They can take frontline managers, can have index indicators going to their directors, going up to your CIO, can just have a score that has a weighted value and communicate how things are going. A couple other use cases, backlog reduction, percentage of change. So you can see the change in an analytics hub, you can see the change in some of the widgets, but you couldn't set a target on it. So if I had a use case where my target is to reduce backlog by 10% quarter over quarter, month over month, reduce my backlog 5%. I started out with 1,000 incidents. I need to have 5% less than that at the end of the next month. You now can make that formula indicator where I can set a target, see that just by itself. And then I also have change from baseline. So I might say, well, we started something on July 1st, so I want to compare everything to July 1st. We do this with some new releases. We'll compare to the start of the release. We want to have this. Where are we going to end up? Or change in period. I want to know not necessarily the cumulative incidents to date, but I want to see the change from the end of the month till today. And every day I'll see the change from the end of the month to today. And then there's also use cases that come up occasionally about altering the formula based on specific breakdowns, based on specific elements. This can get a little cumbersome when you're typing stuff in, but it is very useful sometimes. So that if some formula does not make sense for a certain breakdown, you can have an if statement so that it just returns null, that nulls itself out, rather than being kind of nonsensical, or it just alters what's going on. This is used in index indicators where there might be some group that doesn't have the value in the index, that they don't do changes. So don't put change. If the element is this, do not put that, do not calculate change into the weighting. There's also another option, not in the PA utils forms, but to handle null. So one of the issues we had with index indicators or in some other cases were a null value. Prior to Madrid, the behavior and the default behavior in Madrid is still that if any indicator is null in your formula, the formula will evaluate to null. There is now an option to say, no, if anything is not null, do not automatically evaluate to null, and you can handle the null case. I believe there still has to be something that's not null. That is not null. But just because you have one null value, you can now handle that very gracefully, whereas before it was a little bit more cumbersome. So the important notes here, again, building on everything we've talked about before, it allows you to visualize and set targets where you previously just couldn't. And again, like the change, I want to set a target on change. You can't do that before Madrid. And now it's very simple to do. When you start using the PA form utils, it adds complexity. You're adding more code, you're doing more things. It's not as simple as A minus B, but you can do a lot. There's a lot of power in here. Just be really careful about what you're doing. Be thoughtful about, is this really helping me get something, or am I just doing a derivative on a derivative on a derivative? Lots of useful links. So you'll see some documentation on just formula indicators if you hadn't seen those. If you were looking at the basic information, the documentation is great to explain what formulas do. There's more documentation on the PA formula utils. There are lots of new methods that you can call and how to call them, and some use cases for those. So that's in the documentation for Madrid. And then if you're looking for some more examples from JavaScript, we showed a couple of them. But the formula indicator examples, there's a blog post that walks through several different use cases of where you may want to use JavaScript in your formula indicator. And now I was going to bring up a quick demo, and then we'll get into the questions. So just as an example, here is a list of indicators that we built. So we have the basic indicators, we have some JavaScript formula examples, and some calls where we're using the PA formula utils. We'll click into a couple of these, but all of these are based off of the percentage of incidents resolved by first assignment group. And some of the things that you'll see, we'll look at really interestingly, is that the Chen chart, you'll see the difference. So here, if I'm looking at these trends, and I apologize for this being super small, but I have a date where I have 5.13. I have 3.03. I see that in the trend. When I apply the JavaScript to round to the quarter point, even though I'm looking at the same data, it's now 2.75, 2.75, 3.75. Everything is rounded to a quarter of a point. Occasionally, this is something you need to do, and you have the power to do it. In this case, we have the show or hide scores based on date. Again, we see the same trend, but there's just nothing up until the date I want it to show. I only want to see future scores. And if we see something like that, we'll go into the round quarter point formula, or it will log me out. So if I go into my rounding to the quarter point formula, we'll see that this is just standard JavaScript. I'm just doing a map.round on my existing formula, the two fixed. If I go back to my dashboard. To get to something a little bit more advanced, if I go to my query other data, this is, I will say, is a bit nonsensical, but I'm taking the percentage of resolved by the first group. And again, I don't think you should do this, but you can if you needed to. I'm doing a glide record to pull up some information and then doing some math on that. So what I'm doing here is translating a USD value to a euro value. Now this isn't actually based on dollars, so this doesn't make any sense, but it'll adjust those values accordingly. And if I go back to my indicator, again, this is based on here. Here, this is 12.5%. And if I have that adjustment to euro, it's a little bit less than dollars, so it is 11.07. It's taking the exact same trend line, but I'm adjusting the numbers here based on not a constant, but actually a variable every day. So we can do the same thing. And then the last point I want to pull out was the PA formula util. So again, really powerful. I'm going to look at the reduction in change percentage. And if I line this up on the existing indicator on the percentage of first group and turned on change, which is here, this would line up to exactly looking at that other indicator, just showing the change. But let's talk about how this works. I'm using the score start variable, doing some server-side JavaScript to adjust the number of days in UTC. And then this is what's new, a PA dot. So there, in formulas, we had score start and score end. Now we have a something that's kind of similar to current. If we were in a script and we have current dot, in formulas, we have an object which is PA dot, which is calling the PA formula utils. Lots of methods, take a look at the documentation. And then the one really important thing to note is that when I'm calling a PA methods util, we have the same notation about bracket, bracket, square bracket for the indicator I'm referencing, but I have to put a dollar sign in front of it, just a slightly different syntax to say I'm in a function. And you'll see this, we've always had the browse for indicator. In Madrid, you have browse for method. When I click on that, I now have a list of methods that I can call. I can go to the docs and just type it in, but this will let me select what I want to get, like get the score for a specified indicator. And then it'll just ask me what date do I want to get it from. I can use score start or I can give it a constant. So we'll pick a date and select, and that screwed up what I had, but this will get, instead of get change, but I'm now going to get PA get score. I need to put an indicator in here. So we're going to do browse for indicator. Number of open cases. And the very, very important thing is use in method. I am using this in one of the methods, so I'm going to check use for method, and that will put that dollar sign in front. And then a constant date, or you can do a glide date time by manipulating score start. Okay, that is the demo, and I think now we're ready to get into questions. So we do have a question about the URLs. So Tom is putting those into the chat. And if you search, if you just search the documentation for the for formulas, you'll get to this. There's more pages in there as well. These were a couple key ones that were really good and really useful. And then the community, it's always useful to search the community. It's a blog post about getting more out of formula indicators is the name of it.
Yep, I think we have those all covered. So as a reminder, you're all welcome to go off mute if you have any questions, or you can type them into the chat.
Hi, Adam. This is Ed Shushani, and if I ask you a question on something that I'm struggling with.
Yes.
Oftentimes when I'm doing formula indicators, such as average days opened of incidents, I find that in the end, if I want to produce an average for the month, I get different results if I put on in my formula, add like a time series to each of the automated indicators. How do I know when to use the time series in the formula versus not? So it's some duration over number of open tickets. Do I put some against each of those?
Yeah, so generally, let me bring up an example. There's a setting that's going to affect your results. Putting it in there, I rarely put the time series in the formula. You can, but then it's going to be restricted to that time series, and normally I want it to be a little bit more flexible. Let me see if I have age in here.
Yeah, if there's a better way to do it, that'd be great.
Yeah, so let's look at average age of open incidents. Is that?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. All right, so let's look at this, and we're going to do two changes here. So let's look at what this looks like right now. So I'm going to go to the Analytics Hub. Okay, so 113 days is what we have now. You got to love demo data. Actually, interesting that it all goes down. But 113 is what I have now. That's fine. And I'm going to apply this to be by month. By month average. Okay, and so a couple dates, 144. Okay, I guess I have to do some plus. Okay, so 113, 144, and 193. When you're doing this, especially applying the time series, you got to be really careful about this option, the apply time series to result. Are you familiar with this setting?
Not really.
Okay, good. I think this is what you're asking about, actually.
Well, usually when I put the indicator in, I've been just adding a time series to that indicator.
Right. So in this case, I'm not going to do that.
Yep.
And let's see what the change is.
Because what happens is when I look at the scores and I break down each of the component parts, I'm getting averages for those, and I'm not always feeling like I'm getting the right numbers of those.
Right. So here I'm doing by month average, and this was 144 before, and now it's 99, and I somehow don't have scores for January and February. It's a very different number.
Yep, exactly.
Right? That's what you're seeing. So this option, what it does is, should I sum these up first, or should I sum these up first and then average them, or should I average them and then sum them up first?
Yeah.
So generally, what you're going to want to do, and there are different use cases for different things, but I'm going to want to apply the time series to the result, which is going to sum or average these things first, and then apply the time series to give me the month. So what I want to do for this is, if I'm averaging these, average all of the summed of open days for every day in that period. Give me the average for the number of open incidents. Do that aggregation first, and then run the formula. In this case, what we're going to do, by applying the time series to result, by checking this, it's going to calculate this number for every day, and then it will average those for what's going on. Okay.
So for this particular example, I want that box checked, and I
Yes.
don't want the sum in the.
Right. The question is, do you want to average averages, or do you want to count up? There were 100 incidents. The total age is 300 days, and the number of incidents is 30. So that means it's 10 days out. 10 days.
And that's not new in Madrid.
That's not new. No.
Okay.
No. It's under other, and so it's very well hidden.
Gotcha.
But if your number is not appearing to be correct, check that and uncheck it.
Will do. Thank you.
That's the best thing. The best thing to look at. You can, I believe, if you put the time series in here, it's always going to apply the time series first.
Right.
If you manually say I want this time series, but again, generally I don't do that, and then I'll apply the time series on the widget, because that way it'll work by week plus, by month plus, and I can use this anywhere I want to use it.
Yep. Okay. Because I was seeing very different results when I would go to the records and total them up and then average them. I was getting a different result. So I will give this a try. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So we have another question coming in about the performance analytics on SLA breakdowns. So that's the new feature in London, I believe, where we added SLA breakdowns so that you can understand which groups hold which, have the SLAs. So if I have Group A that consume 90% of my SLA and then transferred it to Group B, Group B resolved it quickly but breached, traditionally we would hold Group B accountable, but now we have much more visibility to go, well, Group A actually held it for the vast majority of the time, and they were the problem, not Group B. I do not have an example of that offhand, but we are working on that to get some more content out there. So I can't show that to you today, but in our next office hours, we probably will have an example. So I apologize for that, but that is something that we are working on to get some better documentation for it. We'll probably put some examples of it out on the community before then as well. All right. Any other questions? Feel free to come off mute or send me a message in the chat, and I'm happy to read it. And it does not have to be at all restricted to formula indicators. So anything you'd like to ask, any challenges you have, well, let's talk about it. Okay, one came in. How do we handle large data in breakdown given the properties? Can you explain the use case that you have for that? Do you mind coming off mute, or feel free to just send me some more information in the chat? Are you wanting to understand the different properties, or how do you handle large data sets? Okay, so this has to do with system performance and large data collections. There's different types of system performance you're going to run into with large data, and what the definition of large is matters as well. A couple key things that you want to focus in on are reducing your indicator sources as to be as small as possible. So the two types of performance we have to deal with have to do with job performance. How long does a job take to run? Any daily job that takes more than a few minutes, I'm super concerned about. Right? Some people have jobs that run hours. That something's not right. It should not take that long in most data. The exception is if I'm querying CMDB data. CMDB data where you're in the millions and tens of millions of records. What we do often with that is that we pre-aggregate the data and then run PA on top of that. But if I'm doing any task-based data, any data that's human-generated, we should be fine. But that is the data collection side. The biggest thing I want to mention really quickly, though, is doing performance has to do with the number of elements. The number of elements in any given breakdown is going to have the largest impact dealing with user performance. So when I view a widget, if I have 1,000 elements, it's going to be slow. If I view a dashboard and I have a dashboard breakdown and I have 1,000 elements, it's going to be slow. If you're in the 50, 100, you should be fine. And we certainly can handle thousands of elements. So we can, I think, handle 10,000 you can do, but just be really careful about the user perceived performance, which has to do with the number of elements in a breakdown. On the job side, the biggest thing we want to do is make sure that we're focusing on the right period. And it really scripts are where they're going to get you. If we're just querying the data, we're dealing with the database side, we can pull a lot of data back. By default, we restrict the number of number of records we're going to look at to 50,000. That can be increased a good amount. But what ends up happening is how many scripts do I have? If I have any PA scripts, it's going to run per row returned back from the indicator source. So you got to be really careful that you're not returning rows that you're not going to look at. So what I mean by that is I'll see cases where people pull back all tasks this month in the indicator source, but in their indicator, they only look at today's. Well, if that's the case, put that on your indicator source and only pull back today's. Generally speaking, we want to have nice tight indicator sources. So I want to do daily or monthly indicators. There should almost always be an indicator that has no additional conditions. Flexibility-wise, you can run into cases where I have one big indicator source and then I have 10 different indicators. That's okay sometimes, but be cognizant if none of those indicators have no additional conditions, then maybe we want to split that indicator source into 2 or 3 indicator sources where something does come through. You're going to pay a price for it in pulling the data back. You're going to pay a price for it in scripting. So be really cognizant, make sure those are nice and tight. If it's taking way too long to do monthly, maybe we should just calculate this daily and use time series to aggregate those monthly numbers. Do not look at more data than you need to. Another quick note in that is I've seen some people who want a rolling 90 days or rolling 30 days worth of data. So they have an indicator source that runs every day that says, give me all the incidents open in the last 30 days. A better approach for that would be just do daily, which you already have, number of incidents open today, and do a time series for month to date or rolling 30 days. Use those time series, and you're going to see that you're going to be able to get rid of some of your indicators where you've had to duplicate things in the past. I hope that helped, but certainly we can talk more about that coming. Just be really aware, make sure your indicator sources are no larger than they need to be, and then you're using scripts as minimally as possible, and you're going to see a lot better performance. And if you're dealing with tens of millions of records, like with CMDB, then we'll look at pre-aggregating, which is we'll run a job with Glide Aggregate that summarizes the data, and then we run PA on top of that, and everything runs very, very smoothly. Okay, the next question I see, like to group time cards. Like to report time cards into a month. Okay, so time cards get to be a bit challenging because time cards by default are by week, and weeks span months. So there are a couple of decisions that you have to make. If I submit a time card on the 30th of a month that covers the next month, which month is that? Is it let's say I submit a time card on April 30th, and I actually don't know when the week ends. Let's see, when the month ends. Yeah, so the 29th. The 29th of April is a Monday. I might have a time card for Monday, but is that for April or is it for May? Do I do 2 time cards? The way I've solved this in the past for time cards is simply put an additional field on the time card that says month of time card. So we have week starts on, and what I'll add as a field is month starts on, with a business rule that when the week starts on, I calculate the month starts on, and that will put my logic to say, based on the start date, when is this month good for? Is it April or May? And then reporting on that is very simple because I'm reporting on that other month. Does that answer your question about time cards? Okay, great. Time cards are logically a challenge because of that month split. So adding a couple fields to support your reporting is going to make your life a lot easier. Okay, and there, by the way, if you're dealing with time cards, you do want to look at some of the new out-of-the-box content. I believe there's some in Madrid. There may be some coming up in New York. Whatever it is, whatever you do, always look at the new out-of-box content that's coming out. There's improvements to what's there. There's additional indicators. You may not want to switch over to it, but you certainly want to see what's available every time. I'd recommend getting when a new release comes out, spinning up a dev instance and just installing all the out-of-the-box content that sounds interesting and take a look at it. With the solution library, you can upgrade some of what you have, but there's just a lot of great content coming out in every release now. Okay, the next question. What's the best time to schedule a daily collection for SLAs? SLA, this is really general. So just talking about job scheduling, you want to schedule things after midnight your time. At ServiceNow, our days are defined Pacific Standard Time or Pacific Time, so we run everything after midnight Pacific Time, where the day has to complete. If we were based in Amsterdam, we would be in Amsterdam time. So wherever, just like in the financial books, you have a time zone that you close the books on. You want it after midnight when that time zone is passed. And then when do you schedule things? Do I schedule it at 12:05? Do I schedule it at 6 a.m.? That has to do with the data underneath that's changing it. So PA is querying the live data, and we're going to put date filters in. You should have date filters in your time series to say, SLA is breached today, that were due today, and PA handles shifting today to be yesterday. But what you got to be careful about is things that change. So incident information changes minute to minute. So what the priority is, who it's assigned to, what the category is, changes minute by minute. So if I'm reporting on those breakdowns, I want to be as close to midnight as possible, because what can happen if I don't run, say, incident counts until midnight, until 6 a.m., then any changes between midnight and 6 a.m., my PA query is going to look at different data. But if I, as I run that query, it'll know that it wasn't closed, but it will be in a state of closed. It'll be a little confusing. So data that changes very quickly, you want to be closer to midnight. SLAs, the actual breaching is, if you have the breach time, you'll actually be okay, because it either breached or it didn't breach based on that time. So you could run that at further away from midnight. 4 a.m. would be fine. But if you're grouping it based off of category and category is probably okay, but based on assignment, who's assigned to, then you want to be closer to midnight, because what could happen, particularly if you're a 24-hour shop, is that at 2 a.m. it could get reassigned. And so if I don't run my job until 4 a.m., I'm going to look at who breached it incorrectly. Some of that's resolved with the new SLA breakdown information, because I'll get some better insight into that. But it all has to do with how frequently the information you're breaking down on changes.
And I think in this case, it's kind of a unique edge case in that the out-of-the-box SLA jobs themselves that do the calculations across all of the incidents and their corresponding SLAs runs at 5 a.m. So I found that if I do it, meaning if I run the PA collection job before that, some of those breached calculations are inaccurate because it's yet to run across the board, at least. So it's like a balancing act of, well, do I want the breach information to be more accurate, or do I want the ticket data to be more reflective of when the snapshot was done?
What time zone are you based in?
Pacific.
Pacific. 5 a.m. is surprising, because normally they're out of box. They're set to run at 3 p.m.
The SLAs?
Well, so you're talking about the actual SLA updating jobs?
Yeah. So in particular, there are a couple around. For one, the Boolean has breached flag, and then also the elapsed percentages.
So that shouldn't be running at a fixed time. That runs, what happens is every SLA actually creates its own job to update that. Mm-hmm. And there's some documentation on it to get it right, but essentially if it's 4 hours away from breaching, it's going to be running like every couple minutes. But if it's 30 days away from breaching, it only updates once a day. And the same thing, like after a year, it stops updating. Elapsed time is really, that's the one that we have to keep updating. So I'd be surprised if the breach Boolean would be daily, but I know the elapsed time is updated on a sliding scale. The closer you are to that time, the more often it's updated, targeted on the due date. So if I know that's how it works there, and I'm fairly certain in the docs page you'll actually see what those scales are.
Well, I think you've kind of given me food for thought. I think, I'm kind of basing some of our custom request PA collection jobs off the incident SLA space, the out-of-the-box one. Mm-hmm. And I noticed there were some indicator sources that were very similar. They overlapped in that the filter criteria for one used elapsed percentage greater than 100%. And in another, it used has breached, which to me are one and the same. And so if the SLA jobs are more frequently run on the times, as you mentioned, maybe I'll just swap them out to do that. And then that way I can have the PA collection jobs run closer to midnight, which, seems would be ideal.
Right. Those should be the same, right? When it goes to 100%, it should have set to has breached. However, I would report on percentage complete, because one of the indicators I want to see is not just what's breached, what's at 50%, what's at 75%, right?
Right.
And so then you'd be on you have the same structure of indicator source or indicator. I'm always hesitant to use those Boolean fields, nice for reporting and filtering, but take a look at that. If you look at when it's updated, it's not just one job a day, because you might have an SLA that's only an hour, right? A P1.
I think from my experience, at least, if you look at a record, we have a setting that it'll update it on the fly. But for example, if you don't look at the record, the Boolean flag gets set at 5 a.m. in our instance, at least. And I'm just assuming that's out of the box, but that's why I noticed some of my counts were just slightly off. And so, like I said, it was, just kind of a balancing act of, well, what do I want to be more accurate? But I think you've kind of given me some guidance as to how I could change that to get it closer to that midnight.
It shouldn't work that way. So there's something I don't know if there was something customized or what, but that's not how it's supposed to work, because it will handle an SLA that is an hour long. It'll handle an SLA that's a minute long. Right. I might have an acknowledge for a P1 that is 10 minutes. And so we have to know that's breached. And it's very critical about that. So take a look at that, and then feel free to reach out if we need to do some more investigation. We might end up with a high ticket about why you're seeing that behavior. But that's not what I would expect. Okay, so moving down the list. Great question came in about the number of elements as a follow-up. Having the whole, the user table. So I have a very common use case where I want to break down by my assigned tos. Okay, if you have 10,000 people who handle your tickets, we got to talk a little bit more. But a lot of times I have 500 people who are assigned tickets. But who are they, right? Which people do I need to break down by? I might have 50,000 people in sysuser. So what I do is that I make my breakdown source sysuser. You can build your breakdown source on incident with the field being assigned to. If I have a demo instance, why don't I click on that? So I could do my breakdown source on sysuser. And I probably have one. Let's see. So sysuser assignment group. We have users active. Let's go to, I'm going to create a new one. So let's say I want to do assigned to. I want to do a breakdown on assigned to, which again, if you have 100, 500 people who are assigned to, this is fine. Just be careful. This is one that grows large. So I would build it on assigned to, and I have no idea what is in this sysuser demo data, but it's probably, hopefully it's large enough to see this. Assigned to. My facts table is sysuser. User. So one of the things that we'll see here is that you can actually build your breakdown source on incident with the field table being assigned to, right? It's not always sysid. You can pick the field. Please don't do that. Anytime this is not sysid, you're going to have some performance problems, right? You want to build it where the data is. But I would get the right answer in theory if I did assigned to, incident and assigned to. But what I'm going to do is do field sysid. Let's see what we have. So this is 600 records. This would actually be okay, but not all these people handle incidents. What I'm going to do is take advantage of related list conditions here to do incident. If I clicked on the right thing. Incidents assigned to. And what this is saying, there's some great articles on related list conditions. If you have not seen them, look them up. They help you do the impossible. But I'm going to do preview, and now my 603 becomes 55. And what this is doing is saying, it's basically putting a subquery into this, saying only give me people in sysuser where they have one or more tickets assigned to them. And then one of the features I do, I don't put active as true, because if somebody left, I still actually need to see them for a little bit of time. So what I'll do here is created on last 6 months. So what I'm going to see here is I only will see people in this breakdown source that have had tickets assigned to them where the ticket was created in the last 6 months. Because if you have not had a ticket assigned to you, an incident assigned to you in the last 6 months, I don't care. I don't care. This will leave off new people. If somebody joined my group today and has never had an incident assigned, I won't see them. I'm not super worried about them yet. I may have a different report by give me people who do not have any incidents assigned to them, right? Related list conditions, by the way, let you do that. I can run a report where give me people who have no incidents assigned to them in the last 6 months. That's not what I want here, but I'm going to run this and do preview. And in this case, it's the same. This is demo data. But again, this is, if I did updated, same. How about priority? I only want people who've had at least one P1 assigned to them. Right? So only 34 people have had that. So this would be assigned to P1 people. Again, really useful to have. It allows me to clean my breakdown source so I don't have people who left my team 5 years ago because, again, they don't have incidents anymore. But it allows me to have everybody, if somebody left my team 2 weeks ago or somebody else came in, I can see it. I can do this on incident. I can do it on task. It just means that, you know, I can do it on task and then have where the class is incident problem change. So I don't care if you had a project task assigned to you, but I want to make sure you had something in the ITSM space assigned to you. And then I have this breakdown. It'll clean itself. It'll keep it as tight as possible, but have everybody in it you need. I hope that helps. Okay, the next question coming in. I'm sorry, I'm just going to look for a couple things that look at all the questions really quickly. We have another time card question, a string search with custom interactive filters, which I think you might have posted something in the community about. If not, somebody else posted the exact same question. And then index indicators. So let's talk about where we'll answer the time card question really quickly. So the time card question has to do with multiple categories. Do we need to create a field for each of these rollups as well? So what I'll, with categories, one of the things you want to look at in PA, one, you want to have category, subcategory. I'm not sure if subcategory is out of the box with time cards, but I'm hoping it is. If not, you want to use derivative fields. So you may just have them select one category, totally fine. But what I will often do is add a reporting category or super category field. So instead of picking category, subcategory, they're actually picking subcategory because there aren't that many choices. And I will put a field on the time card that's not on the form, not shown many places, but with a business rule that says if you picked A1, the parent category is A. If I picked B2, the parent category is B. And I have some business rules that set that, but then I can report on that very easily. I can also use cascading filters, interactive filters for reporting, and I can do very simple report breakdown relations that help us use that in PA and look at all the time in A and then look at all the time in A1, A2, A3, A4. If you want more information about breakdown relations, there's a session at Knowledge PA 301 where they're going to go into all the hierarchy reporting with breakdown relations using the matrix and hierarchy rollups. Really great session that I'm not teaching, but it's a great session. We'll put some more content out on the community. We're planning to do that after Knowledge to have some of the information in there, but you can look at breakdown relations today. But the way I would handle that is putting a field on the table, not on the form, that summarizes the way you want to report. It is very important that you materialize what you want to report on, right? There's a blog post. It's just a reporting field. It doesn't work in ServiceNow. We need to materialize it. It needs to be there, which again will allow me to use interactive filters, allow me to do pivots on that data, multi-level pivots on that data, and I run PA on it very smoothly, and then eventually use that for agent intelligence and virtual agent. But you got to materialize it because it doesn't know, right? And you do. Okay, the next question that came in was about custom interactive filters. There is a session on this at Knowledge. It wasn't on the slides before, but in the CreatorCon track, if anybody's going to Knowledge, CreatorCon has a few other really interesting kind of advanced developer-focused sessions that have to do with implementing virtual agent and agent intelligence on a service portal, creating PA on scoped or analytics in scoped applications. I'm doing one on custom interactive filters and custom visualizations. There's a lab out there now. It's actually being rewritten. There's a couple better things that we've implemented since since the lab last year. I will update some more information in that community post about custom interactive filters. But if you have the opportunity, if you're going to knowledge, there's going to be a great session on that. Next question that I see is about index indicators to implement predictive modeling. Maybe. Maybe. I have seen things like this worked on before, where I'm looking at all the different weighted scores, and then I calculate what it is, and then it's allowing me to build the formula that forecasts on those things. That's certainly theoretically possible. I have not done that. You may want to look at it's possible. I mean, you just want to make sure you're doing the right things, whether you're leveraging Spotlight to help with that as well, maybe PA on Spotlight, index indicators if everything else is the child KPIs. That should be somewhat of a predictor going forward. And then when we get into some of the machine learning things, that might help as well. But that's certainly a pretty advanced use case. I think it can work, but I don't have a great example to show you. And a few more questions coming in, but I know one of the some of these that came in. Should I stagger collection jobs? We were talking about incident problem, or we were talking about SLA timings. Yeah, you don't want everything firing at midnight. Look at your jobs and look at the data that's coming through. Monthly jobs can, probably don't need to run at 12:05. A monthly job can probably run at 2 or 3 a.m. If you, there was several releases ago, several years ago, we had cases where we'd run out of memory if we ran a bunch of jobs together. I have not seen that happen in a long time. I probably wouldn't fire them all at midnight. I would do a little bit of staggering. The biggest issue I see here has to do with scripting. Scripting will slow down your performance. You want to look at materializing that information so you're not doing a transformation in PA, but you're actually doing it as it's created. I want fast jobs. If all my jobs run in 5 or 10 minutes, then I can get them all done within an hour, no matter how many I have. And I can actually stack more of them on there because they're not memory intensive. If your jobs are running for hours every night, we really need to look at why is that happening? How do we tune up those jobs so they're only looking at the most important data? I saw an example the other day where somebody wanted that 90-day window. And so instead of using a rolling 90-day window, which is a time series they have, they're collecting 90 days worth of data. Well, they're doing 90 times the amount of data collection they need to. Their job is running, not exactly, but 90 times longer than it needs to run, right? Every day. So if they just tune that up and say, no, we're just going to look at a daily number and aggregate it, their job performance problems just go away. So just you do want to stagger slightly. But again, if your jobs are taking a long time, we want to look at why they are. They should only be taking a few minutes, if that. Okay, the next one. At what points in the PA model is it particularly ideal to stay broad and flexible? It's a very open-ended question. I think we're out of time. I will say when I'm balancing things, I want it to answer my questions. I do not want to have a hard-coded assignment group. I do not want to have a hard-coded date. I don't want to have a hard-coded person's name. Whenever I see a case where the group name is this, this, and this, it scares me, right? I want global numbers. If it's good for one group, like one assignment group, why would I not want it for everybody, right? And now certainly there's cases where it's not for this, it just doesn't make sense for everybody because only these 5 teams use this. Only these 5 teams do changes. Okay, but even then, I don't want to list 5 things out. I get very concerned about that, whether it's in a breakdown source or an indicator source. So I want to make sure that everything rolls up where it's one thing, like all groups that have this as a parent, or parent-parent, or parent-parent-parent, or parent-parent, however I want to look at that. This applies for that. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, it gives me flexibility because if team A wants it, well, team B probably wants it. And the inverse is true. If team A wants it and team B doesn't want it, why are we doing it? That's not a global KPI. I can't compare these groups, right? Somebody just wants a report. Fine, I don't know why. It's good to find out why, but make sure that you're looking at global applicability, right? As much as possible. What's the next layer? Well, if you want to see it, does your manager want to see it? And if not, why not? Right? There are certainly valid use cases, but I want to see things that are very broad or that go all the way up. And my biggest concern would be when I'm seeing hard-coded dates, right? Team names, this CI, if it has this CI name, exclude it. It makes my mind explode because it's super hard to maintain and it's not scalable, right? I'm going to end up with 20 different indicators that do effectively the same thing, all different ways. Bad for performance management, bad for performance, bad for maintainability. So that's how I look at things, is how can I group them together? But then again, your indicator source, you don't want an indicator source that says, give me all tasks, right? You want those to be purpose built, but I can say, give me all the tasks today. That's reasonable. Or give me all the incidents today would be even better, because everything that's on there builds on those things. So it is absolutely a balancing act, but that you have to figure out where you want to go to, but you're going to balance performance and maintainability, and you're going to see that those typically line up, but you'll have to go back and forth with that. And there's not an absolute, you have to do this or you have to do that, but you'll balance those things.
All right, I think we're gonna have to wrap up there, Adam. Thanks for jumping on and answering those questions. Quick reminder for everyone, the next regular session that we would have is going to fall during the Knowledge Conference. So 2 weeks from now, we will not be meeting. We're gonna skip that one. We'll pick up again 4 weeks from today, which should be May 22nd. Is going to be our next office hours. So I'll update the community article with the new dates. Look forward to seeing you then. Take care. Thanks for joining.